Be sure to come back safely. At the entrance of the village, Shimura Jinyi, who was wearing a kimono, clasped his hands together, watching the team leaving the village praying silently. His eyes gradually walked away with the figure of a certain person. And the streets were already crowded with villagers, all of them focused their eyes on the people they cared about. The soldiers who went to fight felt the eyes behind them and resisted not looking back. They were afraid that if they turned around, they would not have the courage to rush to the battlefield again. Tears accumulated in their eyes and did not flow down. Danzo's extraordinary perception naturally knew the beauty behind him, and he waved his arms, but did not turn around, and waved it as a final farewell. Stretching his hand into his chest, he clenched the jade pendant tightly. This warm feeling seemed to have a power protecting him. 3 days later, at the border of the battlefield. After temporarily throwing off the coalition forces that were chasing after him, Commander Senju took a group of Konoha ninjas to rest. Damn it. How many of us are left? Commander Senju wiped the blood from his face, looked at his subordinate ninja who was also covered in blood, and asked with a grin with his blood-stained mouth. Commander, we only have 300 people left, and they are all here. The subordinate swallowed hard, the long battle almost made him speechless, his voice was extremely hoarse. Commander Senju scanned the remaining 300 ninjas around him. All of them had more or less scars on their bodies, and many of them were even incomplete. When I retreated to the second line of defense, I was overshadowed by the spies in the team. When the enemy cooperated with the outside, I let many brothers stay there, even myself. Turning his head to look at the injured left arm, the wound left by the siege and battle of the strong shadow-level powerhouse, the bone can be seen deep, and it is still, sizzling, bleeding. Gritting his teeth, he tore off a piece of cloth and tied the wound tightly. The blood immediately stained the cloth, and the severe pain made him grunt. Barely standing up against the tree trunk, his body was already extremely exhausted. Looking at everyone, he couldn't help but smile wryly. Brother Qianyu, now there are only 300 remnants and defeated generals left. If Konoha's reinforcements don't come again, even this second line of defense will have to be lost. Picking up the kunai that already had a gap, the smooth knife surface reflected his face at this time, with chapped lips, pale complexion, and only one pair of eyes, still as sharp as an old wolf. Suddenly, a leaf wobbled and fell down. Feeling the slight vibration from the ground, his face changed, and all the relaxation disappeared in an instant. All the ninjas around stood up without his reminder, picked up the same scarred weapons as their bodies, and looked firmly at the direction of the movement. Now, they have no way to retreat. This mountain is the last hurdle of the second line of defense. Once they break through, it means that all enemies can cross the line of defense and go straight to the heart of the Kingdom of Fire. Slowly, the movement in the distance became louder and louder. One enemy appeared in their line of sight, followed by a second, and a third. The darkness was overwhelming, and more than 1,000 coalition ninjas surrounded all the Konoha ninjas. Brothers, we should die together today, are you afraid? Commander Senju stood at the front of the line, looking firmly at the enemy in front of him, and asked without turning his head. Afraid? I'm afraid it's not a Konoha ninja. The burly man with one eye missing beside him laughed boldly, stepped forward, and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. All the remaining Konoha ninjas grinned with blood-stained mouths and shouted loudly, "Don't be afraid." Looking at the few Konoha ninjas who were still resisting in front of him, Yun Nin who led the vanguard had a flash of appreciation in his eyes. Yun Ren village admires the strong most, whether it is in strength or in spirit. Obviously, the group of people in front of them have shown themselves with actions and are worthy of his respect. I couldn't help but cherish my talents. Every Konoha ninja, if you surrender, I can decide not to kill you. Kirin and Iwanin in the team turned their heads to look at him one after another, but Cloud Ninja accounted for the majority in the team. No matter how dissatisfied they were, they could only hold back. Go away. For Konoha. Hearing his words, Commander Senju silently tied a bright red cloth strip on his head, glanced reluctantly at the Konoha logo on his clothes, fixedly looked at Yun Nin who persuaded him to surrender, and took the lead in launching a countercharge to the enemy. Konoha. All the Konoha ninjas behind them ignited the belief of death, and took up their weapons and rushed towards the enemy whose number was much higher than their own. The battle of trapped beasts. I don't know if I will live or die. Looking at the Konoha ninja rushing towards him, the vanguard captain Yunin shook his head regretfully, and with a wave of his hand, all the coalition ninjas also rushed up to meet the Konoha ninja. The blades collided, blood spattered, killing both sides with red eyes, and dyed the land red, full of blood and fire. It can be expected that the trees that will grow next year will definitely be more vivid and green. In the dense forest, a figure moved extremely fast, and the torn ninja costume on his body was extremely incompatible with his childish face. Jumping onto the branches of the big tree, his legs trembled a little, holding on to the trunk, panting heavily, stretching his hands into his chest, feeling the existence of the letter, heaved a sigh of relief, and looked into the distance with firm eyes. Definitely. We must send the appeal letter to the village. Uncle Senju and the others won't last long. After barely resting for a while, he picked up chakra and jumped onto the branch of another big tree. Now, every second counts. Huh. Why do you feel that there is a situation ahead? The knowledge-colored domineering, who was fully released, sensed that there was a ninja with an extremely unstable breath of life moving at an extremely fast speed. Generally speaking, the breath of life is stable, even in battle, it will not cause any violent fluctuations. There is only one possibility in this situation, and that is to squeeze the energy deep in one's own cells to cause a short-term status bonus. However, this would overdraw one's body, and the ninja would never use it unless there were special circumstances. Turning his head, he greeted the other high-ranking members of the army, then summoned Toothless Boy, and flew towards the life signal with wings spread. With its speed, it can return to the team in an instant, so there is no need to worry about causing any confusion. Besides, Senju Tobarama also followed the team this time. It would be a good thing if anyone really didn't have eyes. Black lightning flashed across the air, and instantly came to the ninja. The moment Toothless Boy just landed, a few shurikens flew over, hit the scales on its body, made a jingling sound, and stabbed feebly on the ground. Looking in the direction where the shuriken flew, a young ninja was holding a kunai, with sweat or dew on his hair, looking at the man in the dragon with vigilance. Look clearly, little guy. Seeing the Konoha forehead guard on the young man, Danzo walked out of the shadow of the big tree. In the sunlight, the Konoha forehead guard tied to his arm was extremely conspicuous. Bang. Seeing the familiar sign, the boy's kunai slipped from his hand, and he sat slumped on the ground. The tense nerves in his head suddenly relaxed, and he almost passed out. After recovering slightly, he took out the letter from his arms and handed it over, opened his chapped lips, and said in a hoarse voice. Border defense. He took the letter in his hand and read it at a glance. The handwriting was extremely scribbled, obviously it was a letter for help written in an emergency. After reading all the content, the alarm bells are ringing in my heart. Has the situation at the border become so bad? These guys are really courting death. The paper was crushed into powder by vigorous fingers, countless red eyes appeared in the shadow of the forest, and disappeared in a blink of an eye. After forming seals in his hands, he left a shadow clone in place to take care of the young ninja, summoned Zanpakuto, and rode Toothless to the border. The strong wind blew across his cheeks, his long black hair fluttered in the wind, and he looked sharply in the direction of the far border. A mere 1,000 people, go over and kill you immediately. Clang. A sound of gold and stone passed. Senju commanded the kunai in his hand to completely collapse. The blade fell to the ground after drawing an arc in the air, and the enemy's blade slashed down along kunai again. Relying on his intuition on the battlefield, he narrowly escaped the fatal blow. Turning over in embarrassment, he leaned against the few Konoha ninjas left, panting heavily and looking at the enemies who had surrounded them, surrounded by the bodies of his brothers who died in battle. Captain Yunin raised his ninja knife, pointing the sharp tip at Commander Senju who was covered in blood, his eyes staring at him. Surrender, you have no chance. Looking at the less than 50 ninjas from the same village around him, Commander Senju laughed at himself. I didn't expect that I would die in the hands of you. Needless to say, surrender or something, Konoha, there is no ninja who surrenders. At the same time, there was a flash of rejoicing in my heart, at least, that little guy was tricked out by their partnership. These things, just let them do it, the brats who haven't even grown hair are easy to deceive. Even if the request for help was sent to the village, the reinforcements would not arrive so quickly. He, who commanded more than 1,000 people, knew very well that if the logistics were not done properly, he absolutely could not send troops. What's more, it's a strong army. Since the outbreak of the war and the reaction, it's not bad to be able to arrive in a week, let alone now. Seeing that these Konoha ninjas were still going to resist, Captain Yunin's eyes flashed bloodthirsty. He raised his hand, swung it down forcefully, and said coldly. Then let me die. Behind him, a group of allied ninjas pounced on them like jackals. All Konoha ninjas have no trace of chakra on their bodies, they close their eyes and wait for death. At the very moment, a wall of fire appeared between the two sides. The fierce high temperature caused the coalition ninjas to avoid it, and some unlucky ones who were too late were burnt to charcoal in an instant. Holding a black knife, A black-haired figure stepped across the raging fire and stood in front of all the wounded Konoha ninjas, looking at the enemy coldly. You guys, damn it. The fierce killing intent contained in the words made the hairs of these ninjas stand on end, and they looked at the man who suddenly appeared like an enemy. The light from the flames behind him shone on Danzo's body, and the shadow was reflected on the ground. Toothless flew to the wounded to protect them and avoid being affected by the ninjutsu. Countless red eyes appeared in the dark shadows. Each and every black shadow ninja emerged from all the shadows of the woods, faintly forming a semi-encircled circle, squatting or standing, trapping the enemies. The three black shadow generals also emerged from the shadows, their powerful aura faintly felt like a shadow level, and they greeted each other. Hey, Nia, I haven't seen you for a few months, so it's so late. Che, Lazo, you're not much better. This guy Lei Su also appeared. Are these guys in front of us the target? Talking about their respective code names, they knew their respective identities well in their hearts. Furukawa Kai and Mizuki Yuma did not expect that the third General Kurokage would belong to the Hinata family. Konoha's top wealthy ninja is well known. Sure enough, adults are adults, so who is next? Looking at the system panel crashing and reducing the points, Danzo didn't feel any distress in his heart. Looking at the many Konoha ninjas who fell on the ground, the anger in his heart was almost uncontrollable. The black air emitted by the black shadow mask drilled out from between the eyebrows and surrounded Danzo's body. The transformed mask made it difficult to see his face clearly, and his scarlet eyes stared at the ninjas in front of him. The sealing circle in the pupils rotated rapidly, suppressing the negative energy caused by the mobilization of the black shadow mask, and firmly guarding the last trace of clarity in his heart. The Black Shadow Mercenary Group? I didn't expect them to get involved, so I must tell Lei Ying immediately. The vanguard captain of the coalition army looked at the crowd of Black Shadow ninjas, and couldn't help but take a half-step back. The expressions of the other ninjas in the team also changed drastically. These guys earned their reputation in the ninja world by themselves. They have the status of the 1st Mercenary Regiment, and there are many bones and blood underneath. After all, the ninja world is so big, and it is inevitable that they will run into each other when performing tasks, and the village's attitude towards the Black Shadow ninjas has changed from contempt to emphasis. One can imagine how much they have paid. The 5 great ninja villages have always had a monopoly position in terms of missions, but they were severely torn off by the Black Shadow Mercenary Group. Thinking of this, his eyes flickered, he stepped back slightly, and calmly let a few ninjas stand in front of him. After feeling a little safe, he dared to straighten his waist, and his tone was threatening. Everyone in the Black Shadow Mercenary Group, why do you want to block our coalition ninjas? Are you not afraid of the revenge of my Sankun in the future? Even you guys have to think about the pressure of the 3 ninja villages. The captain of the coalition vanguard smiled smugly. But he didn't expect that as soon as these words came out, the countless black ninjas in front stared at a pair of red eyes, and silently pulled out the samurai swords on their backs. The sharp light on the blade made his heart tremble. I saw the knife-wielding figure in front of me, grinning, raised his right hand, and swung it down vigorously. All the shadow ninjas swarmed up, defying life and death. Damn it, everyone fights. The faces of the coalition ninjas froze, and they secretly groaned in their hearts. If they had a choice, they would rather fight with Konoha ninjas. The ninjas in black in front of them didn't know what fear was at all, and they didn't care about the injuries on their bodies. Even if there was only one person left, they dared to charge the enemy. Horizontally afraid of being stunned for fear of dying. What's more, this is still a large group of desperate lunatics. Bite the bullet and fight them. The sharp samurai sword cut through the skin several times, splashed blood, and stained the ground red. Chakra turned into brilliant ninjutsu and hit the shadow ninja, dissipating into wisps of black smoke. The leader of the coalition vanguard glanced to the side, and the other 3 Zunying-level powerhouses who led the team looked at each other, staring at Danzo in front of them, their fingers fluttering, and after a while, they formed powerful ninjutsu one by one. Earth Dungeon Mountain Earth Art Fire Escapea Burst Wind Flurry Dance. Water Escapea Water Dragon Bullet. The 3 ninjutsu rushed to Danzo at once. With the support of their chakra, even if it is only a B-level ninjutsu, it still has the power of an A-level ninjutsu. Turning his hand over and doing a sword flower, leaning down, Danzo looked at the ninjutsu attacking, and the corners of his mouth curled up. One shot, change, swallow back. The bright sword light flashed away, and all ninjutsu were divided into 2, leaving Danzo unharmed. HMPH, you simply don't take us seriously. Want to get close to the Holy Lord? Pass our level first. The blood of a shadow-level ninja, I have to give my sword a good try. Seeing that these guys ignored them, the three Black Shadow generals were furious even though they did not harm Danzo. It should be noted that the master humiliated his ministers to death. One person confronts one of the ninjas, relying on their extraordinary physique to force them into danger. Damn, it looks like they can't count on it. The leader of the coalition army watched the other people who could help in the team being entangled, and felt resentful in his heart. Seals formed in his hands, and various spells were formed at an extremely fast speed under his skillful technique. When he gritted his teeth, the amount of chakra that was originally condensed in his mouth increased several times. Most of the chakra in his body disappeared instantly, and there was a hint of madness in his eyes. Die. The technique of water escape and great waterfall. The huge chakras gathered behind the throat, and spit out a huge water ball from the mouth. For a moment, the water covered the sky and covered the sun, like a river flowing in midair. That's a level ninjutsu. The so-called Holy Master must be destroyed. The other three lieutenants temporarily pushed back the Black Shadow generals, and shouted excitedly when they saw the ninjutsu released by the coalition commander. Seeing the overwhelming water rushing over the wall of fire sprayed out by Toothless Boy, Danzo calmed down, and the flames emerged from the black knife out of thin air, and the extremely high temperature caused the surrounding air to change its shape. Terrifying energy condensed on the blade, staring fixedly at the coming attack, his lips parted slightly. Water defeats fire? I think fire swallows water. Let you see how the real flame is. Flowing blade like fire as Shijiya Songming. The moment Danzo drew the sword, all the energy accumulated in the blade exploded, and the tornado-shaped flame wall rushed out of the sword, spinning to face the huge rushing water. The moment the water came into contact with the fire, the entire battlefield was instantly filled with smoke. The thick water mist did not lower the temperature at all, but the extreme heat made the water vapor scorching hot. All the fighting ninjas felt the hot breath and quickly avoided it, staring at the soaring flame storm in dumbfounded. Such a terrifying fire escape directly suppressed the high-level ninjutsu of attribute mutual restraint. The water escape ninjutsu sprayed out by the leader of the coalition army was forced back at once, and the flames once came to him. The terrifying high temperature even scorched his hair a little bit, and the confident look on his face has disappeared now. Gritting his teeth and stomping his feet, his face turned pale, and the chakra output increased by 3 points again. Water escape ninjas, why are you still standing there? Help! One of the quasi-cage ninjas saw his state, and quickly opened his mouth and shouted at the dazed coalition ninjas. They just woke up from a dream, quickly formed seals, spit out streams of low-level water escapes from their mouths, merged into the water of the great waterfall technique, and only then were they able to resist it. A gray-haired ninja in the coalition army looked at the overwhelming Huodon and muttered to himself. One person's fire escape needs so many people's water escape to block it. I have only seen such a scene on one person. The young ninja beside him heard his words and couldn't help asking. Who? Uchiha Madara. The name of this legend is widely heard in the entire ninja world, but he did not expect that he was already qualified to be compared in the eyes of this veteran. The strength of the adults is getting stronger and stronger. As the earliest old man, who followed Danzo, he watched him grow up step by step from the beginning. Although it has always been beaten. Mizuki Yuma saw that many ninjas were attracted by Danzo, his eyes lit up, and he said with a smile. Hey, take advantage of this opportunity and attack as a whole. Follow me. Hanada Chuan rushed up first. The ability of the mask allowed him to better control his body, making the soft fist even more powerful. At this moment the soft fist was more rigid than its original appearance. The remaining two looked at each other and rushed up again. Now it's up to whoever gets rid of the opponent first. If this continues, we will lose sooner or later. The coalition commander felt the chakra disappearing from his body, and thought with an ugly face. Because the cells were drawing energy too quickly, they even faintly felt a little pain. Looking forward, the ghost ninjas in black costumes are gradually occupying the battlefield, while the coalition ninjas are retreating steadily. The light of swords is long, and the light belonging to ninjutsu is getting less and less. They seemed to be tireless, and every time they swung their knives, they were surprisingly powerful. Although the people on their own side were still fighting hard, they didn't use expensive ninjutsu. We must let the large troops behind support us, otherwise, the hundreds of people in the village may really have to confess here. As for the people in the other two villages, well, it doesn't matter. The leader of the coalition looked at the ninjas in charge of the other two villages who were fighting General Sombra, his eyes rolled, and dangerous thoughts kept popping up in his mind. Let them give me Yun Ninja Queen. A series of Yunin's proprietary codes were issued, and the eyes of the Yunin on the battlefield flickered, After receiving the signal, they fought and retreated, and quietly retreated behind the other two ninjas of the ninja village. And those Yanin and Wanin who were fighting above did not notice the small movements of the teammates around them, and were still fighting selflessly. Slowly, the number of cloud ninjas on the battlefield became less and less. At first they didn't care much, but felt the pressure from the enemy was increasing, until a fog ninja pushed back the black shadow ninja in front, and just wanted to take a breath, but found that there was almost no cloud ninja around him, so they shouted. "No, those cloud ninjas have all run away." "What?" Following this shout, the two quasi-cage level ninjas looked at the battlefield in shock. They were about to question the commander of the coalition army, but he smiled mysteriously, disconnected the chakra transmission of the water escape ninjutsu, and left directly. With the loss of the main water escape output, just relying on those low-level water escape ninjutsu can't stop Danzo's flowing blade at all. All the unresponsive water escape ninjas were swallowed by the flames, leaving only a pile of dust in place, without even screaming. "Q-nin. You just wait for me. I will be sure when I go back." Looking at the densely packed black shadow ninjas in the distance, the two responsible ninjas were heartbroken and also sent out a signal to evacuate. Before they finished speaking, there was an explosion sound from behind, and the only opening that could be evacuated was blown up by Yun Nin with a detonating talisman, and a huge mountain rock blocked the gap at once. Several coalition ninjas with chakra jumped up the rock, trying to escape, but just as they climbed up, they were beaten down by Yun Ninja who was guarding it. Desperation suddenly appeared on their faces. There was a black shadow ninja staring at them in front of them, and there was no retreat behind them. Their tired bodies had no strength to resist. Looking at the dangerous eyes of the black shadow ninja, the ninja in charge silently knelt down and lowered his head. "We surrender, don't kill us." Hearing his words, General Sombra stopped on the spot with the knife held high, tilted his head, and looked at Danzo inquiringly. After thinking for a moment, Danzo nodded slightly, his eyes drifting away from them. "Acceptable. It would be too wasteful to kill these people, at least they can be used to reincarnate the teacher with dirt. I believe that with their bodies, they must be much better than those dirty ninjas summoned by ordinary prisoners." Hearing the sound of shouting and killing behind the boulder gradually subsided, the rest of Yunin breathed a sigh of relief, and Captain Yunin also began to show a smile on his face. It is difficult for him to explain that these companions are not dead at the top of the coalition forces. Even if Lei Ying protects him, there is no excuse. Now this situation is at least covered by a fig leaf. "Everyone, what to say and what not to say, I think you should know." He turned his head and said to the cloud ninjas who were still smiling behind him. After getting their guarantee, he nodded and thought for a while. A ruthless look flashed across the face of the coalition commander, the chakra in his body surged, and he suddenly rioted, and his tendons immediately spread all over the wound. He gritted his teeth and groaned, spit out a mouthful of blood. The blood came out from the surface of the skin, and turned into a blood man in a blink of an eye, with his life dying. The people beside him hurriedly supported him who was about to fall. "Captain, you, don't ask so many questions, evacuate immediately and return to the coalition forces." After saying this, a smile appeared on his blood-stained face, and this was the best way to save his life. Be ruthless when you should be ruthless, but, it really hurts, hiss. Sure enough, as soon as they returned to the coalition camp, Uring's roar came from the main tent. "What? You said that the vanguard troops sent by me, Wu Nin and Iwa Nin, were wiped out. What about you Yun Nin? HMPH, what do you cloud ninja mean?" Kneeling on the ground, the commander of the coalition army felt the aura of the two top powerhouses. He didn't dare to breathe out, and his head was almost buried in his chest. Looking at the scene in front of him, Lei Ying was also a little dissatisfied with him. With 1,000 ninjas, he couldn't even beat a group of defeated soldiers, and was beaten back by the so-called Holy Lord. After all, it was just a group of mercenaries. This time, the vigor of the coalition forces was wiped out, and the key fortress was not taken down. But, when I turned my head and thought about it, I was also a little happy in my heart. At least, their Yun Nin people came back, and the two men were completely wiped out. After thinking about it, he coughed, stood up, walked to his side, and blocked their suppression of this man. "Hey, don't be angry, you two. He was careless. Besides, he suffered such a serious injury. Besides, Yun Nin, also had a lot of sons lying there." He lowered his head and glanced at Captain Yunin who was kneeling on the ground, and patted him on the shoulder vigorously. He immediately understood Raikage's thoughts. Chakra rioted again, and the wound under the bandage burst open, gradually staining the white gauze red. Seeing the appearance of Captain Yunin, Arcade looked at Rakage, who was smiling but not smiling. After a long time, he snorted coldly, slapped the table, stood up, walked out of the main tent, and walked to the gathering places of their respective villages without saying a word. After watching the two people disappear with a smile, the smile on Lei Ying's face disappeared. He walked to the chair and sat down. Looking at this old subordinate who had followed him for many years, he sighed and said, "Okay. Let's stand up. This level is over, but they have strengthened their defense against us from now on." Captain Yun Nin, who stood up silently, could only return a wry smile. This was already the best solution he could choose to keep the power of his village at that time. As for those two villages, who are they? Neither Lei Ying in the camp nor he thought in his heart that this choice was wrong. After this incident, this fragile alliance, which is already based on greed and desire, will become even more fragile in the future. At the same time, the Fire Nation fortress. The long convoy slowly drove into the temporary fortress created by the Tuten ninjas. Looking at the brand new stronghold, Tobirama nodded with satisfaction. If this last fortress is lost, then Konoha will have to use twice as much strength to regain this place. You kid, you did a good job. Teacher, I caught a lot of ninjas this time, look at this. Danzo touched his nose with his hand, then rubbed his thumb and index finger together, and laughed. Huh. It was clearly captured by the Black Shadow mercenary group? What's your business? Konoha, paid for it. After hearing his words, Tobirama's eyes lit up, and when he saw Danzo's movements, he immediately pretended to be confused, patted him on the shoulder, turned and left. Hey, teacher, you were a sinner. Watching this shameless guy leave, Danzo stomped his feet and said helplessly. Commander Senju, covered in bandages, sat in front of the medical tent basking in the sun, watching the construction scene in full swing, reached into his arms, and took out a white paper. Rough fingers rubbed a personal name recorded on it, tears fell drop by drop, but the expression was extremely happy. Did you see it? Brothers, we are holding on. The moon shyly hid behind the clouds, leaned out slightly and looked at the people on the ground. The cold wind at night blew up the fallen leaves, whirled and flew into the sky, and then wobbled down again. In a certain woods, nearly 100 Konoha ninjas were lurking on a big tree wearing animal masks and night clothes. One of the ninjas jumped to the side of the leader and said close to his ear, Minister Danzo, we have arrived at the target location. The leader took off the mask covering his face, revealing an extremely handsome face. It was Shimura Danzo, who listened to his words, nodded, and narrowed his fox-like eyes, as if he was planning something. Looking at the camp where the bonfire was burning not far away, he tapped his fingers on the tree trunk unconsciously, and the corners of his mouth curled up. Turning his head to look at the group of root ninjas behind him, he said, Be more energetic, this is the collective debut of our roots. Yes. As the elite of the Konoha ninja elite, every root ninja is at least an elite Jongnin. Of course, they do their part for this crucial task. Do you understand the mission requirements? All root ninjas remembered Hokage's special request before departure. They must perfectly lurk behind the enemy, cut off their logistics transportation, and nodded solemnly. Understood, perfect lurking. Hearing this answer, Danzo frowned slightly, and asked again. Be specific. They looked at each other, were silent for a while, and answered with some hesitation. Kill all enemies. Only then did Danzo nodded in satisfaction, stroked his beardless chin, and said with a smile. Ruzi can be taught. Stretching out his hand, Zanpakuto quietly appeared in his hand, the tip of the knife facing the brightly lit enemy camp ahead. Next, give them a big gift, and let their blood give me the root of Konoha. It's really flattering them. Everyone, follow me. Mizuki Yuma took Danzo's words, stretched out his fingers, said something to the ninja behind him, and rushed over immediately. The root ninja followed behind unwillingly, but in the process of advancing, there was a special law faintly in the team, which connected everyone's aura together and deeply restrained. The coalition ninjas occupy the stronghold. The rock ninja team in charge of duty kept walking and patrolling, chatting on the mouth. One of the ninjas looked around and said to the team members. Everyone, don't team up with Yunin when you go out to do missions. Why? Everyone in the team got together curiously and asked. Ahem. He put his fist on his lips and coughed a few times. A few ninjas took out a pack of cigarettes from their arms in seconds and lit them skillfully for him. Hey, the smoke from the Kingdom of Fire is strong enough, I know you guys have it. Taking a deep breath, he was reluctant to spit it out, looking at the cigarette between his fingers with hazy eyes. Since the war, it has become more and more difficult to buy this kind of cigarettes. Okay, you old smoker, but I'm on my last pack, go ahead and talk. Ivanobu, who took out the cigarette, gave him a blank look, put it away preciously, and hurriedly urged him. That's what my cousin's third uncle's nephew said, he's at the headquarters. Hey, your relatives have a wide network. He tilted his head slightly satisfied, and took another drag on his cigarette. That is, don't we have many brothers joining the vanguard? As a result, just a week ago, tisk tisk tisk. As if thinking of something, he shook his head regrettably, and the group of people around him became anxious immediately. Say it quickly, if you break the chapter, you will die. Don't worry, as a result, our Yanin and the one in next door are gone, and only Yunin and the others have come back. Hearing this news, they gasped. Knowing that there are quite a few ninjas in the vanguard, they immediately thought of something. Hiss, could it be that they were killed by our own people? Who knows? Just be careful anyway. The sparks of the cigarette were getting darker and darker. Iwanin took a sharp puff, put it under his nose and smelled it, and threw the cigarette butt behind him. The cigarette butt drew an arc in the air, but there was no sound of landing. He looked back curiously, but he didn't expect that a pair of sharp claws stretched out and directly pierced his throat. Shaking off the blood stained on the spikes, Mizuki Yuma kicked down the dead smoker Ivanobu, stretched out his hand to take the cigarette butt off his head, threw it on him in disgust, spit, and said disdainfully. Damn it, don't you know what public morality is? Throwing cigarette butts around is really embarrassing to the ninja. Then he looked at the rest of the rock ninjas and greeted them kindly. Digiiwa Shinobi, who was in charge of vigilance, saw Yuma Mizuki appearing suddenly with a dazed expression on his face. After he regained his composure, he wanted to shout out, but felt a pain in his chest. Looking down, a sharp shuchin knife had pierced through his chest, and then fell powerlessly to the ground. It's really rude, you don't even say hello. After nodding to the root ninja who solved them, he looked at all the tents, where all the rock ninjas were still asleep. This is the last patrol team, right? It's time to visit the master after saying hello, otherwise, it's impolite. The spikes on his hand stretched out again. Mizuki Yuma slowly walked into one of the tents. In that white tent, bright red flowers were constantly blooming. All the root ninjas pulled out the shuchin knife together, and the shining blade and the moon sticking out complement each other. Step, step, step. Outside the camp, there was a sound of heavy footsteps, the door curtain was lifted, and Lei Ying walked in angrily, interrupting the daily quarrel between Mizukage and Toying, and threw the crumpled documents on the table. Damn it, Konoha's bastards pulled out 5 strongholds of labor and management in one night. The two shadows looked at each other in dismay, picked up the file, tidied it up, and looked at it carefully. After a while, Toying put down the document in his hand, scratched his head, murmured to himself, puzzled. It shouldn't be. According to the news from our spies, the guy in Tobarama is clearly talking about a latent operation. Hearing his words, Reikage's eyes flashed an inexplicable light. The Anbu spies he installed got the same news as them, so they stepped up the anti-spy force secretly. Who knew that Konoha would directly attack the stronghold? Ghost Lantern Wanyue looked at the expressions of the two, and understood in her heart that the news they got was not much different from her own, so. There is only one truth. An inexplicable BGM sounded, and his small brain was running wildly. He slapped the table and stood up. Is there something wrong with our spies? Okay. The two people who were lowering their heads in thought raised their heads to look at Ghost Lantern Wanyue in doubt. This reason seems to be really possible. It's rare that this guy who only thinks about fighting has moved his brain, and it seems quite reasonable. Konoha is a great way to allow spies from 3 villages to deliver wrong information at the same time. Unexpectedly, they could even instigate rebellion against the spies they had carefully selected, and no one responded yet, as if the news was right in the first place. What's even more frightening is that even the supervisor who hides the deepest has no news of any doubts. This made him have to think about whether the spy department had become rotten. It seems that it's time to clean up some of the ins and outs of his spy department. And on the other side, the main account of Konoha camp. Looking at the battle report in his hand, Tobarama had an extremely strange expression, and many high-level officials in the tent had the same expression. Danzo is a real guy. Counting a series of battle reports, he, who is known for his wisdom, suddenly didn't know what to say. The order I gave was to sneak into the enemy's rear, try to destroy the enemy's logistics, and win opportunities for Konoha's attack ahead. But the battle report said that Danzo led Genbu Zongren to break through 5 strongholds in a row. Like a sharp knife, it ruthlessly pierced into the enemy's heart, directly disrupting their layout, forcing the allied forces of the 3 villages to mobilize their forces to defend, and the number of ninjas facing them in front of them decreased a lot. It's hard to say, he didn't act according to the plan at all. Well, I just skipped a series of arrangements, which indeed destroyed the enemy's logistics and achieved the ultimate goal I wanted. But the face is still happy. As for the safety of the routes, there is no need to worry about T. Tobarama. The route is Konoha's rare all-staff elite department, and with Danzo, the little fox, leading it, it's no wonder that there is trouble. Underneath, there are some people holding the battle report, their hands trembling slightly, and their hearts feel as uncomfortable as eating flies. Can this bastard come as planned? Otherwise, it's okay to touch the edge a little bit, play the lurking into a strong attack, and destroy the logistics into a direct heart attack. Thinking of the news they sent back to the village, their scalps tingled, and the village should come to Xingxi to question the crime. Think about it in another way, if you hadn't witnessed the whole process, you would also suspect that something went wrong with the spies under you. He stared at the name on the battle report, gritted his teeth, and looked like he wanted to eat him alive. Okay, everyone, now that the lurking attack squad has completed their mission, the next step is how to attack frontally. There is only one goal: take back the second line of defense for me. After reading all the news, Tobarama knocked on the solid wooden table, put down the battle report, and said in a deep voice. Many high-level people in the seats discussed together. Now that Danzo and the others have created such a good opportunity to attack, they can't waste it. They must make a plan in the fastest time and break through the defense line in one fell swoop. Although those high-ranking spies were also participating in the discussion, they were a little absent-minded, and their expressions were strange and inexplicable. Now that the spy department has made such a big mess, will the village still trust the information they sent back? Then should this attack plan be passed back to the village? You must know that although the commander-in-chief this time is not the bastard Shimura Danzo, he is the teacher Senju Fukena. There must be some similarities between master and apprentice. What if he faints again? All the spies in Konoha are deeply entangled. At this time, Danzo, who was far behind the enemy, sneezed big, rubbed his nose indifferently, looked at the warehouse in front with his eyes shining, and the corners of his mouth curled up. In the land of fire, at the second line of defense, the coalition ninja with the appearance of the squad leader pointed to the stronghold destroyed by the roots, and kept urging. Hurry up, the Earth-Done ninja mend the hole that was torn in the stronghold. The two coalition ninjas who had just repaired a hole rolled their eyes, sneaked out of the stronghold along a hole that had not yet been built, walked slowly to a big tree, sat down on their buttocks, fanned the wind with their hands, and complained. Cut. I know the reminder every day, it won't hurt if I slow down. That is to say, the weather is too hot. Well, let's drink some water. He took out a kettle from his waist, poured clear water into his mouth, and dispelled some of the sweltering heat. The partner on the side swallowed his saliva while looking at the water, and touched his waist, but found that the kettle was not on him. Hey, drink slowly, kid, and save some for me. When the two were playing around, they didn't realize that it seemed too quiet around them. Seeing the gap being continuously blocked, the team leader wiped the sweat dripping from his forehead, scanned around, and found that 2 people were missing. Counting them, it turned out to be those 2 familiar figures. He couldn't help knocking on the wall, feeling a little helpless. Where did those 2 old fritters go to be lazy? Calculating the remaining gap repair time, if it goes according to the plan, it will probably be completed before nightfall, but these 2 guys don't know where they went. If they are lazy, this time will have to be postponed again. During this period, they can't be careless at all. 1 more minute is 1 more point of danger. Thoughts were surging. He turned his head, said something to the people around him, then got up and went to look for the 2 of them. Unexpectedly, as soon as they walked out of the stronghold, they found that the 2 men came back with their shoulders crossed, their bodies still the same, except that the water bottle around their waists was gone, so they let go of their worries and scolded with a smile. You 2 guys, go back to work quickly. If the project is delayed because of you, see how I will deal with you. Hey. The 2 just smiled, but didn't answer, and walked into the stronghold on their own, the corners of their mouths grinning involuntarily and a little weirdly. The team leader scratched his head. Although he felt something was wrong, he didn't think too much about it. He looked down at his wet clothes, and he just wanted to finish the task quickly, so that he wouldn't have to suffer this trouble tomorrow. As time passed, fewer and fewer holes were repaired. Finally, before sunset, the vital stronghold of the second line of defense was completely renovated, and it seemed to be exactly as planned. Several team leaders looked at the results of a day's hard work, waved their hands in satisfaction, and dismissed all the coalition ninjas. Hearing the news, they cheered and rushed to the bathroom. After sweating all day, they just wanted to be clean and tidy. Hey, why don't you two go take a shower together? If you go late, there will be no seats. A ninja who was acquainted with them, held a bathtub, watched the two look around, and couldn't help asking. Okay, my brothers rest here first, and we'll go later. The two people who were questioned stopped their steps and their faces froze. One of them turned around and made a ha-ha, and then passed by. The man shrugged his shoulders and hurried to the bathhouse. It is indeed extremely hot today, so it is not surprising to have this idea. When there was no one around, one person held the scroll from his sleeve, and as the white smoke cleared, a small and exquisite signal popped up in his hand. Notify, get ready to act. The two looked at each other and nodded. The wire of the signal bomb was pulled away, and the bright light bomb rushed to the sky with a buzzing sound, illuminating the drowsy sky, and competed with the sun that was about to fall into the mountains for the sovereignty of the sky. A group of coalition ninjas in the bathroom simply put on their clothes, picked up their ninja bag and rushed out. Their feet stepped on the ground, with wet footprints printed one by one. Their hair was wet on their angry faces, and they surrounded them with kunai. You two guys, what are you doing? The small team pushed through the crowd and roared at them. As soon as the words fell, they felt a vibration on the ground, and they, who had been in the battlefield for a long time, immediately understood that this was a symbol of the action of the large army. Everyone calmed down after a short period of panic. They didn't expect Konoha's main attack direction to be their stronghold. You must know that they are in the same position as other strongholds. As long as something goes wrong with them, reinforcements will arrive in a very short time. Don't panic, we have repaired the defense of the stronghold. As long as we persist for a while, reinforcements will come. Everyone looked at the high defensive wall, settled down, and then looked at the two with unkind eyes. If they haven't seen that the two are fake, then their eyeballs may be pulled out. Your Konoha's plan may fail. The two faced a group of coalition ninjas, but they didn't panic at all. Their sleeves were turned upside down, and Kunai with the detonating talisman appeared in his hand. Turning around and throwing it, Kunai shot out instantly and stuck on the wall. Looking at the shiny detonating talisman, the team leader looked disdainful. This is a defensive wall that has been built with great effort. How could he be stumped by a detonating talisman? HMPH, how can it be so simple? A burst of explosions came, interrupting his words. Looking at the unresponsive wall, the corners of his mouth became even more disdainful, but he didn't expect that the explosion just now seemed to be just the beginning, and there were continuous explosions, and the starting point of the sound was the inside of the wall. Everyone looked past them and looked at the constantly shaking high wall, feeling their scalps tingling. If the wall collapsed, judging from the vibration frequency of the ground, they would not be able to stop this number of Konoha ninjas. Click. The flat wall let out a mournful cry, and a crack appeared in everyone's sight, and they couldn't help but take a step back. Like dominoes, the second crack, the third crack. Run. I don't know who shouted this sentence. The coalition ninjas fled in all directions, throwing ninja tools all over the ground. Finally, a big hole was opened in the wall, and countless Konoha ninjas rushed out of it, beheading the few remaining coalition ninjas who tried to resist. The horn of Konoha's counterattack sounded. Everyone, kill me. Pulling out the ninja sword violently, a blood arrow flew out fiercely, turned slightly to avoid the blood, wiped the body of the knife on the ground, and looked at the coalition ninjas in front of the crowd. Danzo raised the ninja sword to meet them. The root ninja followed closely behind, slamming into the human wall formed by the coalition ninja like an arrow. Damn it, absolutely don't let them rush over. The coalition ninja who was in charge looked at Danzo, who looked like a god of death, broke out in cold sweat, and gritted his teeth and shouted. I can't help but curse in my heart. Why are the master and apprentice alike? After Konoha retracted the second line of defense, he did not fight steadily, but continued to rush forward, forcibly opening a hole in the first line of defense. But the guy in front of him was even more fierce, and led a group of people to kill 7 in and 7 out. The logistics team was almost smashed into a sieve. Forcing all 3 shadows to move, Mizukage and Tukage rushed to the front line to hold Tobirama, while Reikage was on the way. Therefore, they had to hold back this time, otherwise it would be difficult to encircle the next place when these Konoha ninjas ran away. It's strange, how come these guys seem to have been beaten with chicken blood? Swinging a knife to kill a coalition ninja who rushed forward, Mizuki Yuma asked strangely. Wind escape a breakthrough after blowing away a safe area with one-handed mudra. Danzo squinted his eyes to observe the expressions of those coalition ninjas. It's all fear mixed with determination, which is completely different from the previous appearance of being defeated at one blow. The premonition in my heart is getting worse and worse, Shen Shang said. Don't keep your hands anymore, let's make a quick decision. The calm blade ignited flames, and the root ninja who was still fighting behind him instantly solved his opponent. Staring at the trembling coalition ninjas in front of him, he replied with a smile. Yes. What? Keep your hands. Hearing these words, the commander of the coalition army felt his scalp tingling. There were no fewer than 3 fingers of corpses on the ground. He tried his best to block it with his life, or was it because they kept their hands? Thinking of the big words that he swore in front of 3 shadows that he would keep his roots here, he felt extremely bitter for a while. Is this the most elite root of Konoha? Sure enough, no matter how fast Konoha ninja swung the knife 3 points away, the speed of the coalition ninja rushing up could not even catch up with the speed of killing at the root. Commander, why don't you just withdraw? Brothers can't stand it anymore. A coalition ninja beside him watched the root ninjas getting closer and closer, trembling with fear. They would never be able to stop such a wolf-like team. Grabbing the collar of the speaker just now, staring at him with bloodshot eyes, disheveled hair, very much like a devil from hell. You think I don't want to withdraw? Lei Ying is already on the way here, so many brothers died, how do you want me to explain to him? Going back is a dead end. Instead of this, it's better to fight with Danzing. If you can't stop it, you have to stop it. Squeeze out the last few words from between your teeth, and with a heartless heart, tore off a strip of cloth from your clothes, tied it on your head, pulled out the ninja sword, aimed at Danzo, and shouted frantically. On board. As a Junin, he led a group of guard ninjas to break through the crowd and meet them. In a short time, he also cut and injured many root ninjas. The scarlet eyes looked particularly ferocious on the blood-stained face. He looked around the crowd, stared at Danzo who was at the top of the root, and shouted. Danzo, you're going to die for me. Hearing someone calling his name, he turned his head and saw a coalition ninja who was obviously different from the ordinary ones around him rushing towards him, and he couldn't help but feel a little dignified. It seems that he is a master in the coalition army. He walks with wind and looks like a sword. He is not immortal at first glance. This guy should be able to carry the second knife by himself. Not long after, with the help of a group of guard ninjas, he killed Danzo, staring at him closely, with fear and deep greed in his eyes. What is frightening is that this man has already killed countless brothers. Seeing his ease, it seems that he has never used his real power. What's greedy is that if he takes him down, his reputation in the coalition army will reach its peak. Wealth is in danger. Inspired by the madness in his heart, he made the sharpest knife in his life, and a confident look appeared on his face. The light of the knife was like a shadow, and he was getting closer and closer to Danzo. But Danzo didn't seem to feel that the attack was coming at all, and stood there blankly. His face became more and more excited, and he exerted force again, and his heart kept roaring. Faster. Hurry up. Prosperity and wealth belong to labor and capital. When the blade was very close to Danzo's throat, the hand on the handle moved. Seeing this, the commander of the coalition army was filled with ridicule. How could he be able to block his knife with this little distance left? The knife continued to slash, and a bright knife light flashed, but there was no expected touch. My perspective is also changing. The figures around me are infinitely larger, and there is a headless corpse standing in place holding a knife. Looking at his attire, it looks familiar. For some reason, my mind became extremely dull, and I felt that everything around me was becoming dim. Finally, the moment his consciousness disappeared, he remembered that this was his body. Command, sir. All the guard ninjas were terrified to see the most powerful ninja in their team turned into a headless corpse. Cut. It turns out that he's still a guy who didn't kill himself. Regrettably retracting the Zanpakuto, he smacked his mouth and shook his head. Suddenly, the knowledgeable domineering felt an extremely strong chakra fluctuation within the range of perception. Alarm bells were ringing in my heart, and at the same time I understood the reason why these people did not back down. It turned out that there was strong support. Squinting his eyes slightly, he looked in the direction of the wave. With a bamboo hat covering his dark face, his eyes were extremely indifferent. He looked over the crowd and stared at Danzo, like the top predator in nature observing his prey. The relaxed expression on Danzo's face has disappeared, and his hand has been resting on the handle of the knife unconsciously. His face is solemn, just because. Comer. Second Raikage. All the remaining coalition ninjas let out a deep breath when they saw the Comer, relaxed visibly with the naked eye, and finally waited for this figure, and now the root ninjas in front of them couldn't escape. Raikage stood there with his arms folded, his calm eyes scrutinized, and the allied ninjas silently retreated behind him. The guy in his 20s in front of him can be said to be the #1 young generation in the ninja world. Although he doesn't want to admit it, his son seems to be really inferior to him. What a pity, he is not in Yunnan village, but fortunately he is not in Yunnan village. Otherwise, for Lei Ying's fairness, he would definitely be able to take this seat, and his stupid son would have no chance. His lips opened and closed, and he spoke the first words that appeared here. You, like your teacher, are a headache. His words were not stingy with praise, but they were still full of contempt. He immediately lowered Danzo by a generation, and invisibly raised his position. Hey! What Cao Cao said, having a child should be like Sun Zhongmu. As expected of Reikage, the first sentence has a nail in it. Mizuki Yuma under his command immediately heard the meaning of Reikage's words, and the spikes stick out from the palm of his hand, his eyes are red, and he wants to rush forward. What he thinks in his heart now is very simple. The master humiliated the minister to death. Even if Lei Ying was on the opposite side, he would fuck him. He had just taken half a step, but a hand stretched out to stop him. Everyone, stand back, the next battle is not something you can get involved in. Looking at Yuma Mizuki in the fighting state, Danzo's eyes flashed with admiration. No matter how strong he is, it's okay to have such a mind. The anger in his heart was washed away without a trace, and he calmed down and looked at Lei Ying in front of him. It's just that I don't know if I, who can't use the power of the Black Shadow Mask, can defeat the shadow of the world's first echelon in front of me. His eyes narrowed, a red light flashed in his pupils, but it was quickly suppressed. His fingers lightly rubbed on the handle of the knife, and an invisible aura rose up, full of domineering aura. The hem of his clothes moved without wind, hunting, firmly pressing on Lei Ying's body. Such an aura is interesting. Lei Ying suddenly felt the pressure on his body double, and the ground under his feet was forced down a few inches. Even so, his upright body was still like a flag, without bending. After the body adapts to the pressure, concentrate the lightning chakra on the whole body, covering the whole body with chakra and lightning. Lei done chakra mode. With a sneer, he slowly lowered his knees, accumulating strength, like a big bow, ready to rush out at any time. Seeing this, Danzo didn't dare to be careless at all. His whole body was concentrated on a point of the blade, and he used all means, ready to fight. Armed arrogance. Overlord color entanglement. All things are in ashes, and the blades are like fire. The black domineering dyed the blade, mysterious and dangerous, and the orange-red flame rose and surrounded Danzo, like a god born in the raging fire who wanted to judge the sinners below. HMPH, gimmicky. Reikage, who was tense all over, said something disdainfully. The muscles of his whole body seemed to be cast from fine steel. After being pressed to the extreme, he rushed towards Danzo like a cannonball. The speed was extremely fast, and there were bursts of sonic booms, which were deafening. Wherever it passed, airwaves surged, and the grass along the way was crushed into powder by this pressure. Seeing the attack, Lei Ying silently pulled out the knife, squatted up, and stood the knife on his side, at eye level. His eyes were a little sore from the strong wind, but he still didn't dare to close them. He was the only one in his sight. Stinky boy, let the old man die. Hell assassination a second hand. Lei Ying, who rushed over, slowly stretched out a hand. A large amount of lightning concentrated on 2 fingers, emitting a dazzling blue lightning light. The corners of his mouth curled up, and a cruel look appeared on his face. Although this technique has not been fully developed, it is enough to kill you. There are 3 things in life: honor, death, and the hangover. But, it's not time to die yet. The intuition of death in his brain was beating wildly, and the bean-sized sweat dripping from his forehead was enough to kill him. This time, Danzo seemed to see the god of death waving at his soul with a sickle, but the way of the vagabond, live to die. The closer he was to death, the crazier his heart became. He gritted his teeth, gave up all defensive means, and launched a countercharge against Lei Ying. One sword style, flame, blast and endless slash. The wind spirit danced with the flames, praying for it, and the fire soared into the sky, illuminating half the sky. Thunder and flame, the most powerful and terrifying forces in the natural world, are in the hands of human beings, and they are about to collide and burst out to show the world their authority and who is the king of nature. Bang! The moment the blade touched the finger, the whole world seemed to stand still, with no sound or response. The grand aftermath radiated from the contact point, and the ground collapsed with countless cracks and shattered, forming a basin unexpectedly. The huge force came, and it was accompanied by a tingling sensation that spread all over the body. Danzo only felt that the strength of his whole body was weakened a lot at once. The whole person involuntarily plummeted downwards. When he was about to fall to the ground, Toothless Boy appeared in time and attached Danzo to his back. The Roker swordsmanship is a very strong swordsmanship. Based on this, it has integrated a series of swordsmanship such as Flowing Blade Ruohuo and Sauron swordsmanship. It is quite powerful when singled out. What's more, after so many years of actual combat, it has already developed its own style, so it has never suffered a disadvantage in this regard. Today is the first time that Danzo has been positively suppressed in what he is best at. Sure enough, the #1 taijutsu in 5 cages is well deserved. As everyone knows, Lei Ying was also very shocked in his heart. The surface of his skin was slightly dry and cracked, and he felt a burning pain. He looked down and saw blood oozing from the 2 fingers that were in contact with the blade. This is a move under the protection of Thunder Chakra. This kid's swordsmanship has reached such a terrifying level. Even the warriors who used to make a living with swordsmanship didn't have such power. With the help of the dragon's back, Danzo jumped down from the sky, and the flames covered the blade again, and rushed quickly. The 2 beams of light hit the sky from the ground, and they collided dozens of times in a row. Dozens of rounds have been fought in a short period of time, and the loud noise of the fierce battle spread throughout the battlefield. But as time passed, the balance of the battle gradually shifted to the other side. From the beginning of the frontal confrontation, Danzo could only counterattack once or twice in the end, and almost lost the chance to attack. The whole person is like a solitary boat, floating and sinking in the raging waves, in danger of capsizing at any time. The situation is extremely serious.